Imagine standing at the edge of everything you've ever built, everything you've ever believed was yours, and having it ripped away in a single moment. That's exactly where Colton Reeves found himself on a crisp, ordinary morning in Phoenix, except nothing about this morning was ordinary. The day he signed those divorce papers, everything he thought he knew about life, love, and family came crashing down. Colton walked out of that lawyer's office with nothing but 2 suitcases, his entire world reduced to fabric and zippers. His ex-wife, Bridget, stood there in those pearl earrings, ones he had given her 15 years ago, her auburn hair pulled back perfectly, looking exactly like she did the day they married. And her words? Sharp, cutting, unrelenting. "You're 45 years old, Colton. Starting over with nothing. Good luck with that." And she was right. She took the house in Scottsdale, the one with the pool where he taught their daughter, Tessa, how to swim when she was just 4. She took the cars, including his BMW with 3 years left on payments. She even took the joint savings account they had built together over 15 years. And as if all that wasn't enough, she took his stability, his pride, and almost his soul. But the hardest part? Watching Tessa, only 7 years old, press her little face against the glass as he walked out the front door, her breath fogging up the window, eyes wide with disbelief and heart-wrenching pain. Even though he couldn't hear her, he knew what she was saying. "Daddy, no." And in her arms, clutching her favorite stuffed butterfly like a lifeline, was the only piece of comfort she had in that moment, the small, fragile thread that tied him to the daughter who needed him most. Back then, Colton was Superman in her eyes, the man who could fix any scrape, any bump, any heartbreak with a Band-Aid and a funny voice. But that night, as he packed his things, Colton realized he couldn't even fix his own life. 3 months ago, he thought he had it all figured out. Regional manager at a furniture distribution company, a beautiful wife, an amazing daughter, a house with a 3-car garage. The classic American dream, right? But dreams have a cruel way of unraveling when the ground beneath you shifts without warning. The company downsized. Bridget decided she couldn't handle being married to an unemployed man. Suddenly, Colton went from living the dream to being the guy counting change at the grocery store, the guy nobody wants to employ, the guy everyone looks at with pity. And then, a single ordinary Tuesday changed everything again. A computer screen, one number, one revelation that shattered everything he knew about his life, and revealed that his father, gone for nearly 2 decades, had been planning for this moment, anticipating this disaster, even before Colton knew what disaster truly was. And that meant something. Something powerful. Something that could ensure his little girl, Tessa, would never have to watch her daddy walk away again. But the reality of now? Sleeping on his brother Deacon's couch at 45 years old, the brown leather cracked and squeaking with every movement. 6 months ago, he was living in a 4-bedroom house in Scottsdale. The pool gleaming in the sun, 2 BMWs sitting in the garage like trophies of a life he thought was secure. 15 years of marriage, a daughter they adored, a career he thought would carry him into retirement with comfort. Gone in an instant. He remembered the first time he saw Bridget, the woman he would later marry, at a 4th of July barbecue. The way she argued about public transit in Phoenix, the passion in her voice, the laugh she gave at his terrible hot dog joke. They were married in 18 months, Tessa came 3 years later, and for a very brief while, everything seemed right. Colton had been regional manager at Sun State Furniture Distribution, making $110,000 a year plus bonuses, overseeing shipments across 3 states. His boss used to say he could sell sand in the desert, and for a long time, Colton believed it. But last October, the company was bought out by a national chain, and the word restructuring meant one thing. 15 of them, including Colton, were out the door. He told Bridget it was temporary. "My resume is solid," he said. "I'll have something better in a month." 1 month became 3. The rejection letters piled up. Either he was overqualified, underqualified, or just inconvenient. And Bridget? She started leaving job listings on the kitchen counter circled in red pen. Then she moved into the guest room. Then she called the divorce lawyer. "You can't even keep a job anymore," she said during their last real fight, her voice like glass breaking in the kitchen. "We need stability, Colton. Tessa needs stability. My father warned me about marrying someone without ambition." Without ambition? He had worked 70-hour weeks for 8 years. And now, because he was down on his luck, because one cruel twist of fate had shattered their family, he was suddenly the villain, the man who would drag them down. And she delivered her final verdict with surgical precision. "You're 45 years old and starting from scratch. I won't let you drag us down with you." Divorce finalized 3 weeks ago. Arizona's community property laws meant she got half of everything. But her lawyer painted Colton as unstable, unreliable, a man in free fall. The judge? He sided with security over love, stability over loyalty. Enter Deacon, the brother who never married, who ran a small auto repair shop in Tempe. Deacon opened his home without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," he said, and in that moment, Colton realized family was more than just DNA. It was loyalty. It was shelter when the storm hit, and there was Mom. Ruth Reeves, 71, living on Social Security and a small pension. She called every day, voice thin with worry. "I can send some money," she said. Colton lied, insisting he was fine, but the guilt was suffocating. Taking money from her would be the final admission of failure, and pride didn't pay for groceries, bills, or Tessa's ballet costume. Which brings us to the moment that broke him all over again. A text from Bridget, crisp, sharp, impossible to ignore. Tessa's dance recital was coming up. Costume fee, $300, his half, $150, and the reality was brutal. His bank balance was barely enough to cover a tank of gas. $73.42 to his name, not nearly enough for the costume. Not nearly enough for gas to see Tessa. Not nearly enough for anything that mattered. He called Bridget. "Can we work something out? Maybe installments?" She laughed. Not the warm laugh from their wedding day, not the teasing laugh that once made him feel alive. This was sharp, cruel. "Installments," she said. "The recital is in 4 weeks. What are you going to do? Give them $50 a week. You don't even have a job." And just like that, Colton Reeves, the man who once had it all, felt smaller than he ever had before. Sitting on Deacon's porch, staring at the numbers on his phone, the weight of failure crushing him from all sides. The house, the cars, the money, the dreams, all gone. Only 2 suitcases, a squeaky couch, and the quiet determination to figure out how to rebuild a life that felt irreparably shattered. But even in the depths of despair, there's a spark. And Colton is about to find out that sometimes losing everything is exactly what it takes to discover the things you never knew you had. Things that can't be taken. Things that can't be measured by a bank balance or a title at work. The days ahead would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. Nights spent crying in the driver's seat, mornings counting coins, weekends building memories with Tessa while the world seemed to mock him. It was all part of a journey that would demand every ounce of courage. Every shred of pride he had left. Because the truth is, sometimes when life strips you bare, it's also giving you a chance to rebuild not just for yourself, but for the little girl who still sees you as Superman, even when you feel more like a man in free fall. And Colton? He's about to discover that the disaster he thought ended his life might actually be the beginning of the most important chapter yet. The chapter that could change everything. The chapter that could turn heartbreak into purpose, despair into drive, and desperation into a story no one will ever forget. What happens next? Well, the next chapter is waiting, just beyond the horizon, and it's going to challenge him in ways he never saw coming. But one thing is certain. Colton Reeves is not done. Not by a long shot. And when the moment comes, he's going to realize that losing everything sometimes is exactly what you need to gain what truly matters. And little Tessa? She might just be the reason he never gives up. Because when you're down to nothing, the only way forward is up, and what he discovers in that bank in downtown Phoenix will turn everything on its head. It's a moment that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, family, and the invisible threads that tie a father to his daughter. And trust me, When Colton Reeves takes that first step toward reclaiming his life, the stakes are going to be higher than anyone could imagine. Higher than even he could imagine. The story of a man who lost everything, yet may be on the verge of discovering everything he was meant to have. It's just getting started, and the truth, the kind that shakes you to your core, is waiting, right around the corner. Picture this. Your daughter's big moment is right around the corner. The recital she's been practicing for months. All the other kids have their matching costumes, bright and sparkling, their parents beaming in the front row. And then there's your little girl, standing there in plain clothes pretending she's fine. But you know the heartbreak that's hiding behind those eyes. That's exactly the place Colton Reeves found himself that night, sitting alone, holding his phone, imagining Tessa at that recital and feeling every ounce of helplessness weigh down on him like a lead blanket. He didn't just sit there, he tried to be useful. He went into his brother Deacon's garage, offering help where he could. Deacon was under the hood of a Chevy Tahoe, replacing the alternator while Colton held the work light. And as he did, memories flooded back. He remembered doing this exact same thing years ago when they were teenagers, when Deacon was just learning about cars and Colton was his eager little assistant. The familiarity was comforting, a tiny tether to a world that once made sense. Then, out of nowhere, Deacon asked a question that would change everything. "Remember when Dad opened those savings accounts for us when we were born?" The words hung in the air like an invitation to a forgotten world. Colton nodded vaguely, recalling the small desert community bank on Central Avenue. He remembered the passbook, Dad showing him the entries when he was just 10 years old, using pennies on the kitchen table to explain the magic of compound interest. "Every penny grows," Dad had said. "Time and patience. That's all it takes," Deacon went on, almost casually, like it wasn't life-altering news. "Mine had 800 and something when I turned 18. I used it to buy my first real tool set. What happened to yours?" And Colton realized he didn't know. Life had moved too fast. High school, college, work, marriage, bills, deadlines, obligations. That small account, started with love and care by a father who believed in him, had drifted into the background of adult responsibilities. He hadn't thought about it in decades, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth checking. That night, Colton dove into the boxes in Deacon's garage, boxes filled with relics of a life that once felt secure. Old photo albums, tax returns from 10 years ago, warranty papers for appliances long gone. And then, tucked inside a shoebox marked "Important Docs," he found it. A faded blue savings passbook from Desert Community Bank dated January 1980. $50. Just $50. That's all his father had started with. Colton held the tiny book in his hands, imagining his dad delivering mail through the Arizona heat, saving that $50 for his newborn son, believing in a future that he could not yet see. And now, 45 years later, Colton Reeves was hoping that $50, nurtured with time and patience, might just be enough to buy his daughter a dance costume. Morning came early. Colton woke at 6, restless with anticipation. The bank didn't open until 9, but he couldn't sleep. He showered, shaved for the first time in a week, and dressed in his only clean shirt, wrinkled but presentable. Deacon handed him the keys to his 2004 Ford F-150, a rust-speckled truck with an AM-only radio. "Good luck," Deacon said. "Hey, maybe Dad squirreled away more than we thought." The drive to downtown Phoenix was a journey in itself. 40 minutes of traffic, of memories of Scottsdale and the life he had lost, of songs about heartbreak on the radio that seemed almost too fitting. He drove past the exit for his old house, past the streets where he'd once been a man in control of everything, keeping his eyes forward. The bank looked different than he remembered. Where once stood a small brick building, now rose a modern glass structure. Marble floors, high ceilings, and that hushed quality banks cultivate to make money feel important. Colton paid the parking meter with quarters from the cup holder, giving himself 2 hours. That should be enough. It had to be enough. Inside, 3 teller windows stood open. He picked the shortest line and began mental calculations, trying to guess the outcome. $50 in 1980, compounded over 45 years. Even at a modest interest rate, it might have grown to a few $100s, a small glimmer of hope. The teller, Yolanda Ramirez, greeted him warmly. Professional but kind, the kind of person who could read your story with just a glance. "I need to close an old savings account," he said, sliding the passbook across the counter. His hands were steady, but his voice cracked on the word close. Yolanda studied the worn document with care. "Oh, my. 1980. This is a legacy account," she said, her voice tinged with respect. "My father," Colton managed, "he opened it when I was born. Dennis Reeves, he passed away in 2006. Yolanda nodded, her fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. "I'm sorry for your loss." Not a platitude. She meant it. She worked quickly, pulling up decades of records. "Mr. Reeves, when was the last time you checked this account?" "Honestly, never. Not since I was a kid. My dad might have shown me the balance once. But I've never touched it myself." She nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen. "And you're sure you want to close it today?" "Yes, I need the funds for my daughter." Yolanda typed faster, comparing entries, scanning through decades of history. Then her expression shifted. A flicker of concern, surprise? Colton couldn't tell. She excused herself, heading toward a glass office where the branch manager, Robert Chen, was seated. Colton's stomach dropped. Something felt off. Maybe the account had been closed for inactivity. Maybe fees had devoured it over the years. Robert Chen stood, extending a hand. "Mr. Reeves, we just need to verify some details. Your father, Dennis Wayne Reeves. Date of birth, October 15th, 1947. Opening deposit, $50, Colton confirmed. Chen nodded. "Yolanda, show Mr. Reeves the current balance." Colton's eyes went wide. He gripped the marble counter for support. The number on the screen was impossible. 67,587,7. He whispered, barely able to form the words. That can't be right. It's impossible." Yolanda handed him a chair. He sank into it, staring at the screen as Robert Chen returned with a cup of water. Every number glowed like a promise kept across decades. "This has to be a mistake," he said again. "My dad, he put in $50. How does this happen?" Yolanda pulled up a second screen. "Mr. Reeves, your father was incredibly thoughtful. He chose our highest-yield savings option in 1980. Interest rates were over 15% annually. And here's what really made the difference. He set up automatic deposits of $25 every single month from January 1980 until his death in October 2006. 26 years and 9 months. That's 8,025s in principal. But the account was grandfathered into a premium rate structure. Even when rates dropped in the 90s, it maintained a guaranteed 7% minimum. After his death, the deposits stopped, but the account kept growing. Compound interest, magic of time. 45 years in the making. Colton thought of his father delivering mail 6 days a week. Sunburned and tired, sacrificing for a future his son couldn't yet imagine. $25 a month likely meant skipped lunches, extra years on old shoes, patched-up cars. But he never boasted, never used it as leverage. Just quietly, patiently, securing his son's future. "He never told me," Colton whispered. "We could have used this money. When Mom's car broke down, when the roof leaked, when he needed medications. Why didn't he touch it?" Robert Chen leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. "Your father's generation understood sacrifice differently. Mr. Reeves. They believed in patience, in preparation, in doing for those they loved without ever asking for recognition." Colton sat back, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. $50 had turned into nearly 70,000. Not enough to buy a mansion, not enough to restore the life he lost, but enough. Enough to ensure Tessa would walk onto that stage with her head held high. Enough to remind him that even in the darkest times, there are threads that tie us to the ones who love us most. Threads that can never be broken. And as he left the bank, passbook in hand, a spark ignited within him. A spark that whispered, "This is only the beginning." Because the story his father had started decades ago wasn't just about money. It was about hope, resilience, and a chance to rebuild a life thought lost forever. The road ahead would be hard, filled with late nights, hard choices, and the gnawing weight of regret. But for the first time in months, Colton Reeves felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Because sometimes, when the universe strips you down to nothing, it's preparing to give you everything that really matters. And what Colton discovered that day at Desert Community Bank was more than just numbers. It was the quiet, unshakable proof that his father had believed in him long before anyone else could, and little did Colton know, this was the moment that would change everything. Not just for him, but for the daughter who still saw him as Superman. Even when he felt anything but, the journey was far from over. The real test, the real challenge, was just beginning. Imagine holding your child's future in your hands and realizing that, for months, you thought it had been lost forever. Picture the relief, the shock, the quiet, staggering realization that what you thought was nothing was actually everything. That's exactly the moment Colton Reeves experienced when he discovered his father's secret legacy. It wasn't his money, not really. In his mind, it had always been theirs. The small, quiet seed his father had planted 45 years ago was about to bloom in ways Colton could never have imagined. With hands trembling, he pulled out his phone and called his brother Deacon. Deacon answered on the second ring. "Did they have the couple $100? Deacon asked casually, unaware of what was coming. "Deacon, you need to sit down," Colton said, his voice unsteady. "Why? What's wrong?" Deacon replied, concern creeping in. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Dad left me $487,000. A pause. Silence. Then disbelief and awe bled through Deacon's voice. "Say that again." $487,000.67, Colton repeated. Colton could almost hear the crash in the background as Deacon dropped whatever tool he'd been holding. Then came the laughter, choked with emotion. "Dad, you beautiful genius. You absolutely beautiful genius," Deacon said. What followed was a flurry of paperwork and verification. Identity checks, signatures, forms, agreements. Colton felt like he was stepping into a new world. But he didn't take it all out. That felt wrong, somehow, like breaking a chain his father had started decades ago. Instead, he made a decision that would shape the rest of his daughter's life. "I want to set up a trust fund for my daughter," he told Robert Chen, the branch manager. $200,000 for her education, her future, everything she might need, structured so she gets access at 25, just like my dad did for me. "That's very wise," Robert Chen said. "And the remainder? Leave it here. Keep it growing. The rest is for the future, too." Colton then stepped out to his truck in the bank parking lot and made 3 decisive calls. First, to his lawyer, "We need to file for custody modification. I want equal custody. I can provide stable housing and financial security now." The second, to a realtor, "I need a 3-bedroom house, good school district near Scottsdale. Cash down, let's make it happen." The third was a text to Bridget. Calm, factual, unshakable. "Tessa's costume fee is covered. I'll be buying a house near her school. My lawyer will file for equal custody." Her voice, when she called back, was sharp, suspicious, almost defiant. "You don't have money for a house. What are you playing at?" Colton smiled inwardly. "Actually, I do. Dad left me something. Tessa won't struggle, Bridget. Not for dance costumes, not for college, not for anything." The disbelief in her voice barely masked the surprise. "How much are we talking about?" "Enough. More than enough. See you at the recital." And for the first time in months, Colton Reeves cried. Not out of despair, but because he understood. Every $25 deposit his father had made, every small consistent act of faith and love, had been a vote of confidence in a future he'd never see. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered into the empty truck. "I won't waste it, I promise." 3 months later, Colton stood in the backyard of his new 3-bedroom home in Awataki, watching Tessa chase butterflies across the freshly mown lawn. The house wasn't enormous or luxurious, but it was perfect. Red brick, green shutters, a sturdy wooden fence, and only 10 minutes from Tessa's school. Her room, painted purple with her dad's help, caught the morning sun, a little sanctuary just for her. "Daddy, this butterfly matches my recital costume," she shouted, spinning as a monarch floated past her. She was wearing the costume that had nearly broken him months ago, the one he thought he couldn't afford. But now the worry was gone, replaced by pure joy. Deacon manned the grill, flipping burgers with the ease of years of practice, while Ruth, their mother, sat under a patio umbrella, tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched them all together. She'd driven down from Sedona that morning, bringing a chocolate cake she'd made from scratch. "Your father always said that account would matter someday," she said softly. "Every month, even when things were tight, he put away $25. It was for when you really needed it." Colton felt the weight of her words, the depth of her meaning. "Why didn't you tell me about it, Mom?" "I didn't know the details, honey. Your father handled it entirely on his own. He just said it was for your future, and I trusted him." Dennis Reeves, the mailman, might have seemed like an ordinary man to some, but in truth he had understood life's deepest lessons: patience, foresight, and quiet, consistent sacrifice. Colton had returned to work 2 months earlier at Southwest Logistics, managing medical supply distribution. The pay was modest, $75,000 a year, but the value of money had changed for him. It wasn't about cars or prestige anymore. It was about stability, about security, about Tessa's future, and about honoring what his father had built, one $25 deposit at a time. The custody modification went through without a hitch. The judge, the same one who had once ruled against him, now raised an eyebrow at the evidence Colton presented: stable home, reliable income, trust fund for his daughter, and a commitment to be present, fully and equally. "This is quite a change in circumstances, Mr. Reeves," she said. "Yes, Your Honor. My father left me an inheritance I didn't know existed. I've established a trust fund for my daughter's future, purchased a home in a good school district, and returned to stable employment. I'm requesting 50-50 custody, equal time, equal responsibility, equal chance to be her father." "Bridget?" Shocked into silence. No words, no rebuttal, just papers in hand and the quiet understanding that the dynamic had shifted. Colton wasn't the failure anymore. He wasn't a man begging for scraps of time or for small amounts of money. He was Tessa's dad. That was more than enough. That evening, after tucking Tessa into her purple room, she asked a question that pierced him straight through. "Daddy, are you happy now?" He sat on the edge of her bed, looking at the little girl who had been his reason for every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night. 6 months ago, he thought, I lost everything. Or so I thought. The house, the cars, the savings, the life I built. But Dad had planted a seed 45 years ago. He watered it with patience, with $25 deposits, knowing nothing about divorce, nothing about layoffs, nothing about the nights I cried on Deacon's couch. He looked down at her, a soft smile breaking across his face. "Yeah, baby girl, I'm happy. Really happy?" She glanced at the stuffed butterfly he handed her, the same one he had held during the toughest nights of his life. "Grandpa Dennis never made more than $45,000 a year," he said gently. "But he turned $50, through patience and persistence, into a second chance at life. For me, and now, for you." Tessa hugged the butterfly, eyes heavy with sleep, and Colton realized the full weight of what his father had done. Every small action, every dollar, every careful deposit had grown into something immense, a life-changing gift that spanned generations. The next morning, Colton drove back to Desert Community Bank. Yolanda greeted him with her warm smile. "Mr. Reeves, how's everything?" "Perfect," he said. Filling out the deposit slip, he started a new account for Tessa. $50 deposit, $25 monthly automatic deposits. Just like Grandpa Dennis, he whispered, because sometimes the smallest, quietest actions, performed consistently without recognition, without applause, become the biggest miracles of all. They compound, they grow, and when the time comes, they can change everything. Dennis Reeves, the mailman, had understood it, and now Colton, holding his daughter's hand, finally understood too. The future was no longer uncertain. The legacy was alive, growing, and waiting for Tessa to one day discover it. The magic of love, the power of patience, the extraordinary effect of small actions done over a lifetime. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of his heart, Colton whispered, "Dad, you were right all along," because the seeds he'd planted so long ago had grown into something unstoppable, something that would change not just a life, but generations to come.